Tansei, good afternoon. Welcome to APTN National News. Half a century ago, Clarence Woodhouse was sent to prison for a murder he always said he never committed. On Thursday, Manitoba Court of King's Bench Chief Justice Glenn Joyal ruled Woodhouse is innocent and was wrongfully convicted. Reporter Sierra Bettens has more.
It's a moment Clarence Woodhouse has waited over 50 years for. Today, at the Manitoba Court of King's Bench, the 72-year-old was acquitted and exonerated of a murder he was wrongfully convicted of in 1974. Outside the courthouse, the soft-spoken man from the Penematang First Nation held up a black t-shirt with the words "innocent" on the front.
What are you looking forward to doing now, now that this has happened?
Well, the public just to relax. Be with my son now.
Grandchildren?
Yeah, my grandchildren too.
50 years ago, Clarence Woodhouse, along with Alan Woodhouse, Russell Woodhouse, and Brian Anderson, were convicted of killing Winnipeg chef Ting Fong Chan. Though Saulteaux is his first language, his conviction was based on a confession written in English. Woodhouse testified that members of the Winnipeg Police Service coerced him into making a false confession. The trial judge and all-white jury did not believe him at the time. Innocence Canada lawyers representing Woodhouse said it was a clear case of systemic racism.
The Crown, Ms. Jules, and we, and indeed the Chief Justice, all acknowledged that there was racism inherent from the investigative stage, the prosecutorial stage, and the judicial stage.
In July 2023, Alan Woodhouse and Brian Anderson were also acquitted of the same crime and exonerated. 2 months later, Clarence Woodhouse submitted his request to Federal Justice Minister Arif Virani, who ordered a new trial for him in July 2024. And in court today, Chief Justice Glenn Joyal acquitted Woodhouse. "You are innocent," he said. "You should not have been convicted."
What did it mean for you to hear the Chief Justice say you are innocent?
Oh, I was happy. I was all happy when I heard something.
After court, the Woodhouse family was invited to the Manitoba Legislature to receive an apology and gift from the Premier.
The gift from the Premier, I just love it.
During a House sitting, Manitoba Attorney General Matt Wiebe acknowledged how the justice system failed Woodhouse.
While nothing can be said that will bring back the years lost of freedom or the time away from family and friends, as the Attorney General of Manitoba, I offer my heartfelt apologies to Mr. Woodhouse and his family.
The Innocence Canada lawyers representing Woodhouse are now calling for a federal and provincial task force to approach systemic racism in the justice system. Premier Knus said, while he hasn't discussed that matter, the province has been working to address these issues through the Manitoba Aboriginal Justice Inquiry for decades. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A man is dead after Winnipeg police were called to an apartment building in the north end of the city on Wednesday. Tenants of the building have been quiet, many worrying for their safety as they have no idea who the man was. Here's T.R. Wheatley now with what is known about the latest police-involved death in Winnipeg.
We do this as we want to be transparent.
Within hours of a man being shot by Winnipeg police officers, Acting Chief Art Stenard called a press conference.
There was multiple 911 calls on this incident. The male was armed with and swinging edged weapons, banging on tenants' doors. All the details we received from the callers indicated there was a risk to the public.
This video was captured by Sue Caribou, a tenant of the building.
When they bought somebody out, they were working on that person all the way to the ambulance.
WPS say he was later pronounced dead at the hospital. The acting police chief said 3 officers met a male in the hallway. Stenard said a taser and firearm were discharged, but could not confirm if there was only one or multiple firearms used. WPS are limiting details because Manitoba's Independent Investigation Unit, or the IIU, is taking over the matter. The IIU is called anytime someone is killed by police.
The next of kin has not been notified yet, so I cannot talk about the deceased at all.
Caribou said so far no one knows who the man was in the hallway.
We are a big family here. and we look after each other.
leaving her to think he was a transient.
How can we keep this building safe? We have swipe cards, but people behind you, they run in.
Caribou said she's gone to check on her neighbors. Many are too scared to open their doors. Outside the building, not much people coming or going. This is the third Winnipeg police officer-involved death in the past month. On September 2nd, Tammy Bateman, a First Nations woman, was hit by a police cruiser near a homeless encampment by the Red River. On September 15, a 52-year-old man was arrested for an outstanding warrant. He was held in a cell at police headquarters after being medically cleared. Hours later, during a routine check, the man was found unresponsive. He was taken to hospital where he was pronounced dead. Police have not released his identity, but sources say he is First Nation from northern Manitoba. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
In a prepared statement, the Assembly of Manitoba chiefs said they are deeply concerned by ongoing incidents, particularly when First Nations individuals are involved. AMC said it is also particularly alarmed by systemic flaws within oversight bodies that investigate police conduct. Covering more than 6 million acres in North America, the Buffalo Treaty was signed 10 years ago to preserve the buffalo ways through conservation, culture, and education. CTV's Rachel Crow-Spreading Wings brings us more from Alberta for rare access to this historic event.
The treaty was originally signed at Amskapi-Bigani, the Blackfeet Nation in Montana, when Canada listed the bison population as a threatened species.
That was a dream of our elders to bring those buffalo back.
The bison, often called buffalo or ini in Blackfoot, are a source of life to many First Nations on Turtle Island. In Standoff, Alberta, Kainai First Nations, the Blood Reserve, more than 1,000 people renewed their commitment. 40 different Indigenous nations came as far as Texas and Manitoba.
Blood Tribe was one of the original signatories of the Buffalo Treaty, and so to have it come here, the gathering of everyone with this shared vision, I think it's immense. It is, again, that gathering of renewal.
Buffalo are being brought back to Indigenous lands across North America, even places outside their traditional natural habitat, like Navajo territory in Arizona.
They can help the land, help the people from all over the place, not just the plains. A lot has happened in the last 10 years. You know, a lot more support, a lot more interest, and it's just the momentum of the buffalo.
This herd has doubled since they were returned to Kainai First Nations 4 years ago.
We welcomed our community and cultural herd in 2021 to the north end of our reserve. And so now we have our own community that can just literally drive by on their way to Lethbridge and be with the buffalo and see the buffalo, and that they're here and they're growing.
In the late 19th century, to both starve out Indigenous people and make way for settlers and cattle, hundreds of thousands of buffalo were slaughtered, and only about 500 remained in North America.
Wherever the buffalo roams, you know, it brings other animals, plants, and so on. It's also very important with regard to our culture, our songs, our stories, our ceremonies are all, you know, connected to that animal.
Efforts like the Buffalo Treaty have helped the population to rebound to about 400,000 in North America today. Rachel Crow-Spreading Wings, CTV News, east of Edmonton.
The CFL has released a new short documentary on the U18 National Indigenous Women's Tackle Football Team. That story when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Canadian Football League is telling the story of the first under-18 National Indigenous Women's Tackle Football Team through a new short documentary.
I feel like girls who play tackle football, or just football in general, I feel like they have like a sense of like courage and strength. Like, you know, like it's not easy at all playing football, especially like tackle.
The documentary is called Medicine Game, a CFL original production. It tells the story of Indigenous Football Canada forming its first ever national Indigenous team just last year. The documentary follows the U18 National Indigenous Women's Tackle football team at Fort McKay First Nation, their training camp in Winnipeg, and eventually competing in Fredericton, New Brunswick. It also explores the similar challenges First Nation players face, including a lack of safe drinking water in First Nations, MMIWG, and the impacts of Canada's residential school system. CFL Commissioner Randy Ambrosi shared his excitement for the team and the new film.
It's a long, hard road. Football is not an easy game, but to listen to their stories, and it very quickly, I think it was very quickly and very easily determined that this was a story that needed to be told, and one that we're very, it's a short documentary, but I think it's a very powerful one and one that we're proud to be associated with.
The National Indigenous team won its first ever game in history this past summer, beating the Ontario Black team 32-21. You can now watch the documentary on YouTube. It already has more than 5.4 thousand views. For the 2024 season, the Canadian Football League unveiled Indigenous-themed logos for each of its 9 teams. Logos were all designed by Indigenous artists, including Chris Chapak from Red Pheasant Cree Nation, who put his own twist on the Saskatchewan Roughriders' signature logo. With more, here's CTV Regina's Mick Favel.
The long-time Saskatchewan Roughriders shield indigenized. Within the logo, the buffalo to signify the spirit of the prairies, as well as the sun, the grass, and the river to represent the signing of Treaty 4. Artist Chris Chipak says he was striving for a look that could encompass all of Saskatchewan.
I had to think of something that was going to touch all 4 corners of our province, not just Regina, not just the football players themselves, but it was going to reach and connect all of us. So there was a lot of parts that I had to put together, and there was a lot of visualizing in my head before I put it all onto a tablet.
To commemorate the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, the Canadian Football League unveiled logos for each of its 9 teams. Indigenous artists from across the country were chosen for the job. Those on the field and on the sidelines are welcoming the new look.
The logo's sick, you know. I don't know what kind of merchandise we got going on. That you got to talk to people at the Rider store, but no, I love it, man. It looks great, and I think it encompasses a lot from this province. So it's sweet.
The Rough Riders have been supporters of truth and reconciliation. This year, an Indigenous-focused youth camp was held over the weekend with over 200 players and coaches making their way from northern Saskatchewan. Saturday's Kiss Saskatchewan game was filled with many moments celebrating Indigenous culture and sport. The organization hopes the new logo will be a way to continue to break barriers and create positive relationships.
This is something that feels inclusive, representative of Saskatchewan, and something that really speaks to how rich our culture is in Saskatchewan, and our long-term commitment to celebrating it and bringing truth and reconciliation towards it.
Chipak says the logo will be a conversation starter or an idea generator for truth and reconciliation.
I think when we think of reconciliation, it is a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And if there's ways that we can work together or heal together, I think that's a huge part of reconciliation.
The new Rider logo has been a hit with fans, and merchandise has been moving fast. The Riders say new shipments are on the way to meet demand.
The results are in for this year's Tim Hortons Orange Sprinkled Donut campaign. The company has announced that it raised more than $800,000 for Indigenous organizations. The campaign was created in 2021 by a group of Indigenous Tim Hortons restaurant owners. And since its inception, more than $4.4 million has been raised. 100% of the proceeds are donated to various Indigenous organizations committed to helping residential school survivors and educational campaigns. They include the Orange Shirt Society, the Indian Residential School Survivor Society, and the Gord Downey and Chani Winjuk Fund, to name a few. In a statement, Shannon Henderson, the president for the Orange Shirt Society, says the Orange Shirt Society extends its sincere appreciation to Tim Hortons for its commitment to reconciliation and for providing a platform for all Canadians to unite and foster education and awareness through the campaign. With the proceeds, we can sustain our initiatives, including the Orange Jersey Project, Every Child Matters Crosswalk, Quilt for Survivors, Survivors Speaker Series, and our 2026 educational event. We now want to tell you about this week's third web poll web question. We're asking, should Canada introduce legal measures against residential school denialism? The three answers include yes, no, or unsure. Have your say at www.aptnnews.ca. Tina House is back for part of her sit-down interview with BC Premier David Eby. We're back in less than 3 minutes. Stick around. On the East Coast, St. John's 11, Charlottetown 17. Nain 12, La Grande River 7. Gaspé 15, Val-d'Or 11. Windsor 13, Peterborough 17. 24 in Timmins, Sudbury 13. Churchill 2, Thompson 1. 7 in Winnipeg, Princess Harbour 8. Regina 4, Yorkton 2. La Ronge 1, Buffalo Narrows 0. Peace River 7, Fort Chipewyan 6. Calgary 18, Red Deer 18. Tofino 15, Penticton 18 with rain. Fort Nelson 5, Dease Lake 6 with rain. Watson Lake 5, Dawson partly cloudy and 8. Sunny and Yellowknife at 6, Wrigley 8. Sax Harbor 1, Colville Lake 4. Baker Lake 3, Chesterfield 3 with snow. Clyde River 4, Aglulic 3. Yesterday, we brought you part 1 of APTN's Tina House's sit-down interview with BC Premier David Eby. Now here's part 2 of that interview.
You've accomplished quite a bit in the last 2 years. If re-elected, what are your plans on advancing the rights of Indigenous people in this province?
Well, there's a pretty stark choice in the upcoming election around how we work with Indigenous people as the provincial government in British Columbia. You know, the piece that I'm proud of is that we're finally starting to step out of this world of going to court, wasting a ton of money on lawyers, years of process, to have a judge declare title, as the Supreme Court of Canada did in the Caribou-Chilcotin, and then still having to sit down on the table and figure out how that's going to work. And we're no further ahead. We wasted a bunch of money, we wasted a bunch of time, and instead of just working on the actual issue, we seem to have gone around it and ended up at the same place anyway. No further certainty for anyone, no further understanding of how it's going to work. And so as a government, we're stepping out of that approach and saying, let's sit down at the table now. Let's get those agreements now up front so we all understand and we can work on these things. That's why Haida was so transformational. Is it was like, let's get out of this court cycle and let's acknowledge we're not going to win in court. Haida Gwaii title, the Haida title is so obvious and apparent to everybody. Why go through I'm a lawyer. I'm not opposed to jobs for lawyers, but I think there's a better use for public money than fighting a losing battle in court. And instead sitting down and saying, how are we going to work this out? What are you going to be responsible for? What are we going to be responsible for? How do we do these things in Haida Gwaii? And when we bring that kind of certainty, we see that the community prospers as a whole. And it's not just the Indigenous community that benefits from this, it's the entire region. And so that'll be the approach we're taking going forward. And then John Rustad, on the other hand, and this is astonishing to me, you know, he's in the legislature on the day of the Haida Agreement, stands up, delivers this really nice speech about how he was the Indigenous Affairs Minister at the time, and he went into the Attorney General's office and said he could never win the Haida lawsuit and this and that. And then he walked out of the legislature and immediately started on social media that the Haida Agreement was an attack on private property, even though private property was excluded from the agreement. So that kind of sort of politicization, when he actually knows better, when he actually knows the real situation around how our province has to move forward, and to have a candidate in Victoria that says, you know, Indigenous people need to give the wheel and the iPhone back if they want to make land claims. Like, these are views that we haven't seen in British Columbia in in modern times in politics, and we shouldn't see them, and we shouldn't tolerate it. And so there's a pretty blunt choice about where he wants to take our province. He wants to undo UNDRIP. He wants to repeal it. You can't repeal the rights of Indigenous people who are protected by the Constitution. Repealing UNDRIP will do absolutely nothing to change the situation on the ground, except it will send a strong message to Indigenous people that the province of BC doesn't want to work with them. And that is exactly the wrong message if we want a prosperous province. It's all of us together, working together to build up our province, and that's what we can do.
Absolutely. Finally, we're just about at our National Truth and Reconciliation Day. What would you like all British Columbians to know about that day and how to embrace that day truthfully?
Well, it's a day that we've recognized by giving British Columbians the opportunity to not be at work, to take a moment to reflect on our history with Indigenous people. And there's a really awful and tragic and horrible history that we have with Indigenous people in the province. And there's also where we are and where we're going, which is recognizing that history, learning from it, and moving forward to build together. I look at projects like we're just down the street from Squamish Nation project where the land of the Squamish Nation under the Broad Street Bridge, there were a bunch of people living there. They were moved off it, and land was just taken from them by government. And then when Squamish got it back through a specific claims process with the federal government, they didn't say, forget everybody else. We're just doing it for Squamish Nation. Squamish said, no, we're going to build housing for the whole community, including Squamish Nation members. And that reconciliation of ensuring that land was returned has resulted in a massive build of rental housing that's going to benefit the whole city of Vancouver. And so the piece that I take on Reconciliation Day is that by doing this work as a province, as a government, federally, as local governments, with First Nations governments and First Nations people, we lift all of our boats. It improves life for everybody. This reconciliation work isn't a zero-sum game. It doesn't take something away from somebody. It creates the possibility for all of us to be better off, and that's my goal, and that's what all of our goals should be. And that's what I hope people take away from that day.
Amazing. I think your experience at working on the downtown east side and working with your organizations has proven well for you as a premier of this province.
I learned a lot from that neighborhood, absolutely.
Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Tina.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Thank you. Back to you in the studio.
And that is your midday newscast for this Friday, October 4th. From everyone at APTN National News, hi miigwech masicho. Thank you for watching. Dennis Ward will be back here in a few hours for your evening newscast. See you again next day.